Incontinence. They're doomed to defecate and urinate without control. Absent of effective surgery, this is a lifelong condition which leads to the women being shunned by their own family. Then there's this lifelong post-traumatic stress disorder that normally accompanies the experience of having been forced into such suffering, usually by your mother or your grandmother and at the hands of a female specialist. But matters are far worse in non-Western countries. Earlier this year, the World Health Organization estimated that 125 million women have been genitally mutilated. They confirmed that this hellish procedure renders absolutely no health benefit and, on the contrary, harms its victims beyond measure, and it violates their human rights as we know them. The practice is common in 29 countries. In the Arab, Muslim, Middle East, and in part of the Muslim, Christian, and animist Africa, according to UNICEF, 91% of married Egyptian women between the ages of 15 and 49 have been subject to this FGM. This particularly heinous crime is flying right under the radar of the West, not only in England, but also in America. A lawyer who deals with immigrant families in New York City believes that it's the capital of female genital mutilation in America. She said doctors usually see it when the women go into labor and they don't know how to deal with this tremendous scarring. Then why does this custom persist? The custom persists in cultures where the value of a woman's life is cheap. Neither her existence nor her suffering, proper penance for the crime of being born female, count. In the West, misguided concepts of multicultural relativism, the fear of offending or increasingly hostile Muslim and African immigrant population has condemned those girls and women to live among us who deserve their rights under Western law and, let's admit it, under human rights. As a human being, they shouldn't be subject to this. This practice has to be stopped, at least in the West. This is tricky to accomplish because the practice is done in secrecy, sometimes on a vacation or somebody's country home, sometimes by a certified physician in the West or in one's country of origin. You might have to assume that all girls of a certain ethnicity or religion will be subject to FGM from the time they're 5 years old as an act of preemptivity, thus running the risk of being accused of xenophobia, Islamophobia, or racism. Failing that, those who perpetuate this crime and who live in the West must be prosecuted. That, too, is tricky. If the mother and the father are responsible, and the girl and all her sisters are removed from the home, who will be their extended family? Who will be their community? How is the state or other people going to treat this girl who's been mutilated? You need to go to the website, wdeanshook.com, and read this full story. You would not believe it. I don't think the women of America understand this Islamic custom. And here's the one that really got my attention. According to WND, the new Ebola czar's biggest fear is overpopulation. From New York, the man charged with managing the U.S. response to the deadly Ebola virus is on the record advocating a reduction in the world's population as a means of social and economic achievement. Ron Klain, who began his job today as coordinator of the Ebola response, was asked in an interview what he thought the top leadership issue challenge of the world is today. Here's that clip.
What do you think is the top leadership issue challenging our world today?
Well, I think the top leadership issue challenging our world today is how to deal with a continuing growing population in the world and all the resource demands it places on the world, and burgeoning populations in Africa and Asia that lack the resources to have a healthy, happy life. And I think we've got to find a way to make the world work for everyone. Climate change is an issue that impacts that greatly by making it harder for people to live where they live, by causing disruption and a lack of resources. But that's just one of the issues. There are other issues too, and I think that the days when Americans could just be focused on America and not really be engaged in the world or past. Our economy is too dependent on events overseas. Our political system is dependent on events overseas. And I think that we've got to be engaged in the world in dealing with these tremendous issues of resources, of dislocation, and of human prosperity and survival in other parts of the world.
He said climate change impacts the population issue by making it hard for people to live where they live. White House science czar John Holdren, the director of the White House Office of Technology Policy since March 19th of 2009. WND obtained a copy of the 1970s college textbook, Ecoscience, Population, Resources, and Environment. The Ulrich co-author with Malthusian population alarmist Paul R. Ehrlich and his wife, Anne, the authors, including forced sterilization, may be necessary and morally acceptable under extreme conditions such as widespread famine brought about by climate change, arguing that ample authority exists to regulate population growth. Holdren and the Ulrich wrote on page 837 of their textbook that under the United States Constitution, effective population control programs, even including laws requiring compulsory abortion, could be sustained under the existing Constitution if the population crisis became sufficiently severe to endanger the society. Let me say this again. He argues that ample authority exists to regulate population growth. Holdren and the Ulrichs wrote on page 837 of their textbook that under the United States Constitution, effective population control programs, even including laws requiring compulsory abortion, could be sustained under the existing Constitution if the population crisis became sufficiently severe to endanger the society. Now, Holdren and Klein evidently are in agreement that overpopulation is a climate change issue, embracing the argument that a world with fewer people emit less greenhouse gases. Well, WND reported last month one of the principal architects of Obamacare, that's Dr. Ezekiel Emanuel, who is the brother of former Obama Chief of Staff and current Chicago Mayor Rahm Emanuel, says society would be much better off if we all simply died at 75. Well, writing in the Atlantic, a commentary entitled Why I Hope I Die at 75, Emanuel embraced a policy of curbing life expectancy in a political system where limited resources necessitate moral decisions must be made concerning who will receive health care and who will not. So, according to Nancy Pelosi.
But we have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it.
And thank you very much for being here. I am your host, W. Dean Shook. And as the dust settles and the smoke clears, I'll see you on our next program. Thank you.
You can get these full stories and more at WDeanShook.com. That's WDeanShook.com.